All right, everyone. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jason Levine here on Adobe Live. And for today's video and audio masterclass, going to be talking about ways to help you improve your audio mixes and really taking a slightly different approach today. This whole week I've been doing on my daily live streams, sort of working from home tips and techniques inside of CC. And it occurred to me that rather than just do sort of a standard class around audio mixing, might also be really helpful to share with you some different techniques that you can actually use to get better at mixing in the first place. It's one thing to sit down and just go, okay, let's mix. But if you don't really know what you're listening for, if you're not really familiar with what frequencies sound like commonly, right? And like what does 60 hertz sound like? What does 100 hertz sound like? What do all these things sound like? It's going to be hard to evolve because you're kind of guessing. Not that it can't be great, not that it couldn't be amazing, but I'm going to show you a couple of things that can really kind of kickstart that. Just a couple of ideas for you to kind of kickstart getting used to hearing sound in a more controlled kind of way, which is just going to enable you to build better mixes for video or better mixes for whatever and however you're delivering your audio soundtracks. So as always, it's great to have everyone here with our live interactive chat. Good morning, Dana, Jason Rose, Anna Davis Court. Very nice to see you. Steve, Mia Helt, nice to see you. Ashni, all right. Tim, of course. Paul, good to see you, buddy. Sorry you ran out of time there. Good to know I'm not the only one who does that. Very, very nice. Okay. So, yeah. All right. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to cover some of those things, and then we're going to go through a couple of different sessions. We'll actually mix, do some things with compression. You get to hear some drums, some vocals, some bass. These are kind of the common things that really very easily illustrate how to use things like equalization. And I'll show you a couple of cool sessions along the way, even revisiting one which Tim and Jan Erik, who are, of course, in the chat, will remember from several years ago. It was the Gather the Crowd session that I recorded and mixed live on stream in our early Twitch days of streaming some five and a half years ago. And I actually uncovered that session and then found a part of that session that I had forgotten about that wasn't in the final mix. So we'll kind of revisit that. I see we've got Bill and Harwinder coming to us from YouTube. Don't forget that the conversation is happening over at behance.net/live. So that's where you want to go if you want to be fully interactive with everybody. Shout it aloud, Tim. That is right. Mia Helt bass. That's right. And of course, it is the Rickenbacker Mia, and it is picked and in some cases played with a wah pedal. Stan, what's up? I know, gonna miss you at NAB, man. It's sad, but we will have something in lieu of. We're not gonna leave you in the dark there. Stay tuned for more information on that. Okay, all right. So let's cut over first to my screen because we're going to start in Auditions waveform view. Oh, and sorry, I got to get rid of my lower third there. Sorry about that. Okay. So I've been doing so much live streaming this week. So much video conferencing, right? My eyes are burning out of my head. It's all about that bass, says Michelle. Yes, it is. I used to really like that song. Keyword used to. Okay, she's cool. I like Megan Trainor. Okay, so you're probably looking at this file here and going, wow, well, that looks like a very modern mix, and it's super hot and loud, and nothing should ever look that way, and that's partially true. Actually, it's not a modern mix at all. I just zoomed in kind of sneakily on some tones. So first thing we're going to start with here is understanding sound, right? So it's obvious if you're going to become, a painter, illustrator, someone who works with brushes or pencils or color, it's sort of understood that you're going to have some idea about how colors work, how colors mix, properties of colors. This is not even getting into hex values. That's way beyond, but just the fundamentals, right? You understand like primary colors. Okay, well, then doesn't it make sense that for audio, you need to understand frequency and not just what it is, but what do they sound like, right? Just like Terry before, he did his live shoot, which by the way, I was going to do a live music recording session for you today. In fact, if you had gone onto Behance or YouTube, you would have seen the thumbnail. It said live music session. I had to change that last minute. I had some gear coming in to enable me to do that because that part of the studio is downstairs. And of course, just with everything going on, everything was delayed. So didn't get a chance. That will be next week, though. You'll want to come to that. But Terry was doing his live photo shoot today. And again, talking about, the elements of lighting and strobes and flashes and all the elements about those. I mean, it's sort of understood if you're going to be doing that, you kind of, need to know some of that, if for no other reason than just to help your understanding to get better and to improve, right? So understanding tones is a really good way to start teaching your ear what to listen for so that you can kind of identify problems, the good, the bad, and everything in between, all right? So I'm going to play this back for you. I was going to turn on frequency analysis first, but we're going to use our chat to see who can guess. Tim and Jan Eric, you can't play, all right? That's not slamming Tim and Jan Eric. I've probably done this with them before, and they know it. So you guys can't play. Don't give it away in the chat. But everybody else, you're playing live, okay? So I'm going to play this file for you. It's coming in at minus 18 decibels, so it shouldn't hurt anybody, even if you're in headphones. But I want you to listen, and then I want people to tell me what they think they're listening to. Maybe you've heard this experiment before, maybe not. Here we go. All right. Sad face, Tim. Sorry. By the way, great stream the other day with Voodoo Val. I managed to catch some of you while I was on the road on the phone, and I couldn't comment for some reason, but I wanted to tell you I really enjoyed your stream with Voodoo Val the other day. Okay, so everybody, what did you just listen to? It was 3 specific frequencies. Hearing test, not bad, Steve. I will tell you that all of the frequencies that you just heard are in fact part of the standard, government-issued hearing test that they give kids in schools. But I want frequencies. Who can tell me what they think they just heard? A beep. Very good, Dana. Hugh Connor, EBS. My dog just freaked me. Very nice. This is a test. Aliens. Harvinder Singh, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Okay, you're thinking along the right way. We need to bump those up, and I'll explain that though, because that's actually that's a very good initial answer. All right, sounds like aliens, Michelle. Okay, so we got aliens, bass, mid-range, treble. Okay, Steve, you're onto something there. Ashi, high, good. All right. Okay, well, we could wait for all the comments to come in. I'm going to tell you now. And in fact, I'm going to open up the frequency analysis. I just I just flung my mouse across my desk. And it's upside down. Let's play this back again. And now I want you to look and listen. Here we go. Okay. So what you are listening to and what you may have just seen, if you were watching there, this is for all of you out there who remember the tape-based days. And we even did this in the early digital days too. This is how you would actually, before slating a tape, before you did any recording, you would put tones on the tape to be used as reference markers. So if you were mixing in one studio and you went to another, you would kind of have an idea first and foremost of what the nominal listening level would be. And typically these were done at minus 18 dBFS. All right, a little bit of nerd history for you there. But this is covering 3 specific frequencies. 100 hertz, okay? 1 kilohertz or 1,000 hertz, and then 10 kilohertz, which is that really high one. Although it's not really high, actually, at all. In fact, all humans, even those who are frequency compromised until much later, and it depends how frequency compromised you are, but with general hearing, 10K is pretty standard. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the 10 kilohertz range. As we go beyond, you heard before, 20 to 20,000, that's super high. And most people, even with great hearing, maybe can't necessarily hear 20 kilohertz. In their younger days, perhaps, as you get older, and if you have any kind of abuse, and that can be anything in the form of, earbuds, AirPods, those kinds of things, they don't help. They're not great for that, especially if you're listening to them on planes very loud. That stuff can start to deteriorate. Okay, so what you would do is you would do 100 hertz, 1 kilohertz, and 10 kilohertz, all right? Now, the key in generating these or playing around with these frequencies is this is going to 100 hertz is kind of that, It's in that bassy fundamental range, right? I'm just going to loop this for a second here. Okay. So again, 100 hertz also, just so you know, is one of those frequencies where when you're recording things and you start adding a lot of instruments, like if you have bass and then you add guitar and then maybe you add some voice, and depending upon how these things were mic'd and recorded, all of those instruments, all of those sounds will have some of this frequency. So what happens is you start to get this stacking, overlapping of this very intense, and that can cause all kinds of overly bassy, muddy kind of problems to start happening, all right? So when you know what to listen for, you'll immediately know, ooh, you know what? That bass or that guitar or that voice, there's too much of that in there. Not to be confused with something like 60 hertz, which is kind of 63 hertz is around the fundamental of a lot of kick drums or bass drums. Different sound. And again, those are shorter attack transients, but basses, guitars, voices, these things are going to resonate longer, and this can cause issues. All right, now, and then we go into the middle here, which is the 1 kilohertz. Okay, Mia, 2-inch tape is still the best way to record drums. That's a heart. I don't know if that's coming through. Because you are right, and I'm sending you a heart. Yes, I mean, come on. Actually, I would argue, because I've done it once, that 2-inch 16-track is the best way to record drum. If you've ever heard a 16-track 2-inch machine, oh my FG, it is the fattest of the fat, all right? Scoop out the midtones. So 1 kilohertz, the mid-range, right? True mid-range. Again, as you start mixing, particularly things with voices, vocals, a lot of fundamentals, a lot of stuff happening in the 1 kilohertz range. So knowing what that actually sounds like, what the frequency itself sounds like, is very helpful. And it also sounds like, yes, one of those like off-air going to emergency transmission kind of things. And then the last one here is 10 kilohertz. Now, I know Mia joked about her dog freaking out. And while that, as I mentioned before, sounds fairly high, that's very much within the realm of, of human hearing. And there's a lot of content that contains elements that actually will go up to 10 kilohertz and well beyond. Now, before, who was it who mentioned the 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz? Oh, Harvinder mentioned that. So just on that, right? Now, 20 to 20K is often something that you'll see when they're like rating microphones, right? So they'll say, this microphone can record 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz, okay? Now, 20 hertz, if you'll recall from one of our streams a few weeks ago when we were doing our boxing sound design stream, 20 hertz is in the subsonic range. So you cannot hear 20 hertz. You will, however, feel 20 hertz if you have a good subwoofer. And even still, you're not even necessarily going to actually feel it, but your body will be resonating. Like you're going to feel something. And if you overdo at excessive loudness 20 hertz, which again is largely inaudible because it's so low and the wavelengths are so long, overexposure to 20 hertz and below subsonic frequencies can actually cause nausea and all kinds of things. And I think I may have mentioned on the stream on the Masterclass, I had a professor at Berkeley who did that. We were in this controlled theater, much like my studio here, perfectly soundproofed and treated. And everyone's sitting in there and he's not talking and he waits like 5-10 minutes and starts to see people run out like, and people were getting sick. He was generating subsonic tones, and they had all these subwoofers in the floor of this theater. So again, you could kind of feel, initially it's like, ooh, something's vibrating. Not really, but kind of. You perceive it, but you don't know. And in some people, in some cases, it really knocks you out there. Okay, tones. So how do you generate these? Again, we covered some of this in the sound design stream. But if you go up to effects, generate tones, one thing that I recommend, and if anybody really wants to get serious about audio mixing and understanding, it involves some ear training, right? Just like we were talking about. Do you understand color science? Do you understand lighting and shadows? If you're an illustrator, you have to understand light and shadows, right? I mean, if you're going to be drawing, you have to understand how light affects things, right? So that, and how it casts shadows and what those shadows look like, you know. Well, it's the same thing here. You actually have to train your ear to sort of understand what am I listening for, right? When you're mixing, what are you really trying to do? Yes, you're balancing things out, but also, as we just discussed a moment ago, you're trying to prevent overlap. So you have to clear out space to let everything have its own space. Otherwise, it just becomes a big mess, right? And that's when you'll hear a mix and it's just kind of, it's just muddy or just not present or not clear or not crisp. They just didn't do such a good job. So you can use the generate tones function in Audition to create a little ear training tutorial for yourself. Now, there's lots of key frequencies that you want to hear. If you want to go completely, like hardcore, you could generate tones, every 200, 150 hertz if you so desire. Again, in the lower frequencies, as the increments are smaller and smaller, it's harder to identify those, and I wouldn't recommend that as a starting point. Perhaps as a starting point, though, you might want to go to some key frequencies. I'm going to move this over, that are commonly used, and I used to commonly train on these in ear training when I would do this. By the way, this document, if anybody wants this is something that I generated for Max. Look at this. This is Max 2014. But I had done a session on advanced audio techniques. And so I covered everything from microphone choices. Now, most of these are still available. I know many of you out there, you're seeing this one. In fact, Howard uses this one right here, the SM7B, really common. RE20 is very popular. Some USB and Rode mics and stuff like that. So this has all kinds of detail, polar patterns, and understanding all of these things. Again, all of this helps you to be better at sort of understanding the concept of capturing audio. But most importantly, I had a little thing in here around key frequencies to remember. And this is kind of evergreen stuff. Now these are, not, they're absolute, but there's a range. This is not like the only area where these frequencies exist. But I wanted to pull this up because this is really essential. And once you kind of understand where to look for certain issues, like you might hear something, but you don't know where is it. This little diagram here can help. All right, Lena. Oh wow. Harvinder, learn something new. Yes, Tim is saying the SM7, you need a good amp B. Yes, the SM7 does require a preamp that really has a lot of gain, or you can use something like Cloud Lifter, but it was never a problem in the analog days. A lot of your USB device preamps, they just don't have enough. I will say Focusrites do, because I have an SM7B and I've never had a gain issue with it. Okay, so bass and bassiness for Mia and my other friends in the stream. 63 hertz, again, one of the common fundamentals for kick drums, 72, 80 hertz. This is where, the meat of a lot of your fundamental bass frequencies and bassiness, not just bass notes, right? Of course, those will move up and down in the scale in hertz. But this is, if you're trying to I want to add more to a kick drum or more to something, to like a punch, this is the range, okay? Now this extends beyond that too, 50. Sometimes you'll have a really deep subsonic-y kick drum that has like a real smack at 54 hertz. So again, it's a range. These aren't exact, but this is the idea. This is the range of where you want to be. Now just sort of overlapping with that are plosives. Plosives are otherwise known as the popping P, right? And I don't actually use a pop filter on this mic, but for most things, when I'm doing voiceover for proper stuff, you use a pop filter to avoid plosives. And they are that short, transient burst of air that causes, if you ever look at the waveform, to go, spike up like that and creates this like bassy distortion, right? So plosives exist in approximately the 50 to 100 hertz range. And you'll see it's a range, but here's where you'll see the fundamental. You're not going to have a plosive at 200 hertz. The fundamental of where that popping P happens is significantly lower. So you'll see the fundamental of it somewhere usually around 50 to 80, okay? Maybe even as high as 100, okay? Now, muddiness. This is the thing that we talk about a lot. And by the way, I told you today's going to be understanding. So this is a class. This is like the lecture. I'm like the boring dude today talking about frequencies. I don't know where else you're going to get all this. And certainly if you're working from home today, this is a good way to just get your nerd on, okay? So muddiness, you hear this a lot. Any audio mixer has experienced someone saying to them, it's kind of muddy, right? Vocals can be muddy. The overall mix can be muddy. Mixing bass and drums together can be muddy. Muddiness exists, and
It's almost like they're muffling.
it's almost like a muffled sound. Like if you're going, I don't know what muddy means. Muddy doesn't really translate to me. Mud is brown and sloshy and smells. It's as if you have a hand over your mouth, which we shouldn't be touching our faces, but that's what muddiness is. So this exists approximately around 200 to 250, even as high as 315, 340 hertz. Not much beyond that. So when you're listening to something, you're going, it's not clear, or it's not defined, or there's too much of something that's making it sound. If you use an equalizer, which we'll do in a little bit, and you pull down some of that 200 and 250 hertz range, you're going to attenuate, minimize that muddiness. And once you start to identify these things and you do it, you feel like the angels rising. I've found it. Yeah. But they're common. You just need to know what you're listening for. All right. Then we have our mid-range, 900 hertz to 2200 hertz. Okay. Presence. So this is the thing that we talk about a lot too in audio. I need more presence. My vocal needs a little bit more presence. The guitar needs more presence. The overall mix needs more presence. Presence exists, again, approximately, and I would even extend this to around 3.5 to 3.7 kilohertz, probably about 3.7, to 4.5, 5 kilohertz, probably just under sibilance. So about 3.5 to 5 kilohertz is where you're going to get presence, or what's also known as lift. This is considered sort of upper mid range. And by boosting frequencies around 4.5 K, it's like you're lifting the covers off a bit. Things are just going to get a little more clear, a little more present, okay? Now, we talked about plosives, popping P's, long or short deep bursts of air. Then we have sibilance. So sibilance is kind of the polar opposite of that. Plosives are low frequency. Sibilance is upper mid high frequency, and that's right. If you've ever recorded someone talking, or maybe you're on a lav mic or a boom, and and it's not even just S's, it can be T's. It just depends. People speak differently, especially in different cultures. Certain sounds are more accentuated than others. So when you have that sharp S that literally sounds like it's sawing inside of your eardrum, that's known as sibilance. Now, the fundamentals for sibilance exist approximately between, and this is very specific here, 5.6K to 6.3K, the fundamental. Can it go a little bit lower? Sure. Not much, right? Your sibilance fundamental is going to be approximately, generally, almost always above 5 kilohertz. But where you're going to see most of it, and again, the sound that causes that harmonic distortion, the fundamental exists between 5.5 and about 6.5K. And that can go actually up to around 7, all right? Or even a little bit higher, sibilance. So if you run into that, now we have things in our applications called de-essing. That's what they do. They minimize that harsh S, but that's where it lives. Okay. All right, checking this out. Rudolph Battle, where can we get this again? So of course, Rudolph, you'll be able to watch the replay right here. And Ashi, did I answer your question between muddy and muffled? They're the same. I was just saying for some, maybe muddy doesn't mean the same. So muddy, muffled, if you hear that in relation to audio, it's the same thing. All right. Fuzzer, more cowbell, of course. All right. Let's see. And Tim, yes, Tim gave a good explanation of that. You have to find your own words. Well, you can do that. It's just that most people may not understand you. Now, these are kind of industry standard terms. Okay. So sibilance. And now I said sibilance typically, again, the fundamental can be somewhere around 7 kilohertz. Just above that, and very separate from that, is presence. And presence, and really this is a different kind of presence than the 4K presence. 8K presence is sometimes referred to as sparkle. Okay. So if you boost around 8K, this is going to give you kind of that, I don't want to say crispy sound. So you have to be careful. And this extends 8, 9, 10K. If you boost around 8, 9, 10K, particularly on a voice, and if you've got a nice, like a condenser microphone, which is what I'm using here, condensers are more sensitive to higher frequency. Part of why many voiceover artists like myself prefer condensers is that in terms of a full frequency reproduction, they're really going to give you everything. Dynamic mics, while great, don't really have the precision. I don't know if that's the right word either. They're just different sounds, and condenser microphones will really capture those upper frequencies with just greater detail and flexibility. So when you hear something, and you hear this a lot, especially in modern mixes, they really crank 8K on voices, because whereas 4K gives you that lift, which really makes the words and things a bit more intelligible, right? A bit more easy to understand. The 8K presence boost, it's like it enlightens them. It enlightens your voice. It's going to enlighten, a bass guitar. Suddenly you're going to hear in a good way some of that string sliding in ways that you didn't really hear before. Okay, you have to be subtle. You have to be careful with it, but that's a good marker. All right, and then the last one here is Shimmer, which is 12 kilohertz and above. Now, just for perspective here, you heard what 10K sounds like. All right, here's 12K. Okay. Mia, sorry if your dog's freaking again. All right, so 12K, again, it's only 2,000 hertz higher, but it's a different sound, and it's different in terms of how equalization reacts to mixed music when you boost 12K. So 12 to 14, again, is what I refer to as Shimmer, and this really just, it's like you're opening the drapes, you're opening the curtains. Everything is just going to feel brighter and more open, right? And if you have a mix or something that is just kind of flat, boosting with what we call a shelving filter, we can't go into all of this, but I'll show you some of this in a couple minutes, boosting a bit at 12K, and a shelving filter means it's going to raise all of the adjacent frequencies as well in kind of this half bell curve. It's like it's opening the blinds. Like everything just gets brighter and shimmery. What does shimmer mean? You can explain shimmer visually, right? It's kind of like jazz hands. Shimmer is jazz hands for music, right? It's like sparkly, high frequency, I would say bubbles, but bubbles to me are slightly lower in frequency. It's almost like hot oil. We're talking about sound here. I don't know. I'm losing the plot. Okay. Rudolph Battle. So making the sound brighter, is that 8K versus 4K presence? Yeah, so brightness could be 8K, 10K, even 12K. Yes, that would be theoretically sometimes you'll see like a brightness control. That's usually the fundamental of where it's starting, around 8K. Again, on some older, when we're talking about hardware here, when you would see like certain hardware equalizers and things that would often have a presence knob, not always, but a lot of them would have kind of this 4500, 4.5K presence knob. And that's kind of that upper mid-range that largely comes out of, again, a lot of the mixing in the early sort of rock and roll days, the 60s and stuff, where, it was one, mono, and two, the way that stations were broadcasting stuff, everything was kind of mid-rangey. You didn't have super bass heavy things in the early 60s. You didn't have super bright things. You had to focus on the mid-range because that's where the voice was, because that's where the lyric was, because that's what people were listening to, right? So yes, so you could definitely, brighter would be like 8, 9, 10, and sort of more presence lift intelligibility of voice or dialogue would be 4K, 4.5K. Yep, and Tim said it perfectly. 8K is going to feel brighter, 4K is going to feel more present. Mia, crispy. Yes, now crispy, again, it can get crispy if your mix already has a lot of elements that are bright and you start increasing 8K, 10K, it does. It sounds like someone crunching potato chips in your ear. Brittle. It sounds like it's falling apart. So if that happens, it means you're doing too much, okay? Sweet. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. Ashi, nutritious. This is an interesting way to describe sound. Yes. Mia, yes. You know what? I will post this. If you go to my YouTube, sorry, nope. Yeah, you can send me a message on Behance, or if you go to Twitter, I'll post it up on my Twitter, and you'll find the link there. Okay, so that's at Beetlejace on Twitter. Okay. Very cool. Audible fairy dust. Very good. All right. So tones. Okay, so that's kind of the first step. All right. Create a sound file for yourself that has those tones, and you can use those references that I gave you there. Again, I'm not going to play all of them for you. Now you know how to do it. All right. And then it's just fun. And then you can make a game out of it. You know, while a lot of us are working from home, it's a great way to do ear training, you know? Make separate files, put them in the multitrack, and then move them around. And then see if you can guess what they were. I will tell you, I will promise you, as someone who used to be, and I say used to because one, I'm older, and two, I'm not a full-time mix engineer like I once was, but back in my day, I mean, 110 and 190, I could hear, with something else in between and go, yep, that was 110, and yep, that was 190, and that's 250. And I mean, I was like insane. I was like an OCD tone wizard, truly, for a period of time. It's kind of my claim to fame. Once you learn how these things sound, your mixes will be infinitely better because you'll immediately know, that's a problem, or ooh, it needs more of that, or makes sense, right? Okay. Now, the second step, once you get beyond tones, okay, and this is a good thing just to practice whenever you can. Practice once a day. You will get better once you can identify what these things sound like. Is having reference tracks, okay? Now, this is not just like your favorite song, okay, but actual recordings that have kind of been deemed really good recordings. Now, there's one artist in particular I happen to work and learn from and was mentored by the 9-time Grammy winner who created all these recordings. The group is Steely Dan, and the engineer's name was Roger Nichols, and I got to work with him for a number of years, and he really taught me how to hear. And Steely Dan records, if you're not familiar with Steely Dan, group from the 70s, are some of the best recorded, sort of in recorded history, right? One in particular, or two in particular, there's an album that they made called Asia, which is AJA, all right? And the other album is from 1978. Asia's 1978. And then the other album is, I just forgot. Gaucho from 1980. All right. So I just opened up my Spotify here. These are some of my reference tracks. And I've been using these tracks with the exception of Beth Ditto. That's a new one that I've added because it's just a really good, very loudly mastered modern recording. But this is the stuff that I reference every time. So Babylon Sisters by Steely Dan, FM by Steely Dan. Again, this is a couple of years earlier, so it's a slightly different recording style. Hypnotized by Biggie. This is a phenomenal recording. And even though I don't know when this was originally released, I used to be able to do dates and years of everything. I've lost some of that. It's just brilliantly mixed and mastered, right? Everything sounds the way it's supposed to sound. You'll notice even It Was a Good Day by Ice Cube. This is another one, like just a phenomenally recorded and mixed record. Upside Down by Diana Ross, another one. California Love. You're getting some of my hip hop choices here. They are limited, but Ice Cube, Tupac, and Notorious B.I.G. are definitely, and Dr. Dre are definitely my four favorites. You have to have some good reference tracks. This one here, Babylon Sisters, I'd recommend for anybody, all right? Sit down, take a moment, and listen to this. Listen to it on your speakers. Listen to it in headphones. Listen to all the sounds. Listen to the separation of all of those sounds, all right? I'll just play you just a couple seconds of this so you can kind of hear what it sounds like. Again, I don't want to... We're not monetizing this, so it shouldn't be an issue. I'm just going to play a few seconds before we get into trouble. Here we go. I have to crank it up, probably. The other thing when you're listening to a reference track like this is pay attention to the frequency response, the real-time frequency analysis. We've talked a little bit about this on these masterclasses. You're going to notice that all of the sounds, the kick drum, the hi-hat, the snare drum, the bass guitar, you can visually identify. The mix is so precise that you're actually seeing individual frequencies whenever a note is played. I mean, it's visually fun to watch, but it's also it's a study. And geez, how do you mix like that? Practice. It's really amazing to watch and to listen to. All right. So again, it's a good idea to listen to a reference, something that you know, right? And I recommend some of these. Now, again, you can use other tracks too. It's just not all things are actually recorded well, unless maybe you're trying to mix towards a particular kind of sound, and then that's not a bad idea too. The whole idea behind a reference is, like, I never just sit down and just like, okay, let's mix. And by the way, this room is sonically treated, so it's balanced. I know what I'm hearing in here is exactly what I'm delivering. And even I still will listen to a couple of reference tracks before I do a proper mix in here, okay? Didn't Queen release some of their multi-track sessions? Could be a good way to play around. Yeah, I think they did. In fact, there was a site, I think, where you could purchase some of them. I mean, I know a lot of these got released through like Guitar Hero and stuff, but yeah, it's a great way to mess around and practice if you don't have access to multi-tracks. Hakan is asking, those reference tracks are all dependent on personal taste, by the way, right? I mean, well, so no. So here's the thing. Again, I don't love listening to Steely Dan daily. These are just great recordings. The whole point is you need to be able to identify frequencies, right? So I'm not listening to it for the enjoyment. I'm listening to it because everything is precisely placed in the stereo sound field. And it's about precision, right? It's about being able to identify where that 63 hertz kick drum lives and how much frequency or space it occupies, okay? Yes, some of them are personal preference, but again, it's based on the recording, not just because I like the songs. The recording for the style is amazing. And I actually have a reference outside of Spotify. It's my own personal recording collection, for every type of music. So like those, you just saw some of like my rap, hip hop choices. If I'm mastering or doing something like that, I'll use those tracks. For any general mix, I always use Steely Dan. And again, it's either the Gaucho record or Asia, because then I know. And if I'm in a different environment, that's the thing. See, once you get the sound of a reference track in your head, when you go somewhere else to mix, play that same reference. Then you'll be able to go, okay, well, I know what that kick drum should sound like, and your room, it's really boomy. So that means that there's a lot of bass in this room. I'm going to mix things a little bit less bassy, right? Because I know if I try and over-accentuate it, it's going to be too boomy, right? So that's the idea around a reference. Is it's not about something that you just like. It's about teaching your ear to hear what really properly recorded things sound like, so that if you go someplace else, right? Maybe you're not always in this environment. Maybe you're going from speakers to headphones. You're going to have a better idea of what you're actually listening to and what to listen for. All right? Oh, yeah, Tom Baker is awesome. Absolutely. Sweet. Thank you, Tim, for posting that in there, by the way. Appreciate that very much. Okay. So reference tracks. So that's another really good way to get into it. Okay, so let's get into a couple things here, and let's kind of investigate a couple of ideas around equalization and compression. All right. So here, maybe we'll start with let's start with Fear the Q-Tip. Also worth pointing out that I am re-releasing my children's song. It's really just a rock song that isn't offensive to children. So it's a children's song, but I mean, I don't know. I can't see too many 20-somethings singing about Q-tips, but maybe. I don't know why not. Sing about other things, certainly. I think I would sing about it. I mean, I do. Well, but I'm not 20. Anyway, what am I trying to say? It's coming out again. I've remixed it and remastered it. So there's a new version of this coming. Now, I've played some of this on the stream before, and this one, all live instruments. And let's first just tackle something like drums, okay? So we're going to take a listen to these drums here just as they are and take a listen to what they sound like. All right, here we go. Okay, just got to get a good idea of what that kit sounds like. Ashi, you must have an elevated appreciation for music. Yes, absolutely. I listen and I pick up on every note. Yes, it's one of those, you know, I mean, everybody will tell you it's a blessing and a curse. It's impossible to listen to things without hearing the multi-track in my head. So I immediately separate everything, which is awesome. But in some cases, it's annoying. It's often annoying to others if I'm listening with someone else. All right. So I'm going to put some headphones on so I can do this with you properly. All right. So we're going to first just talk a little bit about EQ, and then we're going to go into some compression here. Okay. All right. So let me just play this so I can hear what we've got. All right. Now I've got some equalization and compression already on this. So this is a bust track. So I have all the individual drums, the kick, snare, toms, hi-hats, and overheads, all mixed or subgrouped to this single channel here. So on this, this is a Waves, a third-party effect here called the Shep's Omni channel. So what's lovely about this is that this single effect has a combination of equalization, compression, limiting, gating, some additional preamplification, and different options for like noise generation and things. So this one is a very special multi-effect, third-party one. So if we just listen to the drums by themselves with nothing on it. Okay, this gives you a good idea. And it's a nice, really clean sounding kit. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just highlight a section here. And we're just going to kind of loop that so that we can mess around with some EQ. All right. Go into our mixer here. And let's go into our track parametric equalizer. So as I've mentioned before, you can always add EQ from the effects insert here, going into filter and EQ. And we have a whole bunch of different ones. I think I talked about in one of those getting started with audio for Premiere using like a graphic equalizer to begin to understand how these things work. I never use graphic equalizers for mixing though. That you could. There's no reason you can't. I just don't really particularly love the way they sound. They're very linear. Hard to describe exactly what I mean by that. But once you understand sort of what you're listening for, you want the flexibility of a parametric. It's just easier to find and identify things. And I think parametrics in general, you'll hear people say that they're just more musical sounding. And ours in particular actually is. So you can add it from here, but you don't even have to because you already have real-time parametric on every channel. Okay, now it looks like I've even got a setting in here already. So let's just go ahead and kill this. Let's just reset it. All right. So first and foremost, if I'm listening to this, Adi Diaz, is Pro Tools the industry standard? Yes, Pro Tools is the industry standard for mixing music. And really, well, and for many things. I'm the first to tell you that if you're just doing music mixing, no video, and you require MIDI and looping, and really it's music production is your thing. Yes, I too would probably use Pro Tools if I didn't work here because it just offers everything. We don't have MIDI, we don't have looping, we don't have a lot of things that it does, and that's where it still is kind of the standard. Now, Audition, however, outside of missing those few things, is equally powerful for mixing, recording, and everything else, as I've shown here on the masterclasses and in various streams. And for editing and many other things, it's far superior. But yeah, Pro Tools is the standard for kind of industry mixing here. All right. So if we go to the track EQ here, let's talk about some of the things that we were listening for before. So if I'm playing back this drum kit, and remember, I always recommend keeping the real-time frequency analysis open. This is a little smaller just based on my UI than I would normally have it, but it's just a good idea to see, like, is that kick drum, when you hear the kick drum, are we seeing, are we seeing some good pump right here? And also, where is the fundamental of that kick? It appears that, like, this particular kick drum, we are actually picking up frequencies around 40 hertz. Like, that's some good sub. Now, some of that, again, a lot of it has to do with how it was mic'd, the type of kick drum it was. This was a 60s Slingerland kit. But, if this little shape here was really wide and occupying a very wide space, it's telling you, like, that kick drum, it's too boomy. It's too muddy. There's too much. We need to kind of shrink it down. And that process is called adjusting bandwidth. So I'm going to show you that here. So first, as we're listening, okay, so I've already mixed the individual drums here, right? You can see that each one of these already has different equalizers, usually third-party ones. Some are track EQ. All right, virtually no effects. I have a reverb on that one snare in the chorus, but otherwise this is dry. You're just hearing it in the room with some room tone. Let's go ahead and add in some muddiness so you can kind of hear what that would sound like if the drum kit was too muddy, okay? Now remember, muddiness, approximately 200 to 250 hertz. Let's make this around 250. And we're going to keep what is known as the Q, or the bandwidth level, at approximately this value here of 2. Now this is going to be a fairly wide band. So what that means is if I increase this, what you're seeing is it's affecting a lot of the adjacent frequencies. So we're not just amplifying 250 in a very narrow way. We're amplifying a lot of things to the left and right of it. Now, if we wanted to affect only 250, we would make that bandwidth smaller, and that's by increasing the Q value. Okay, so when you're removing things like, you'll often get, if you're recording stuff, sometimes you'll get a hum or a whistle, or like with a snare drum, you kind of get that a ring. You want a very narrow bandwidth to remove the ring, okay? But we're going to keep this fairly broad for now. Maybe we'll do around 4. 2 is a little too broad. All right, and we're not going to do 16 decibels. We'll start, and I'll just play this back, and I'll start increasing this. All right, so take a listen. Here we go. Okay, making sure we're not distorting. Okay, so here it is with 250. So I'm going to let you hear it for a second, and then I'm going to turn it off. And suddenly you're going to go, oh, it sounds like thin. But you're forgetting that it sounded kind of muffled at 250. All right. So first, here's the 250. Okay. Let's kill it. Here we go. And that's also a really significant little bit there too. Again, look at the separation. So this is how you know. It's not that it's too bright. There's beautiful separation. There's no additive low frequencies punching through between those kicks and snares. If you see, remember I told you 100 hertz can be very dangerous. A lot of instruments have a lot of 100 hertz in them. And in fact, you can see here, it looks like I killed some 100 on the snare. I probably killed a bit on the toms too, and some of these other EQs. Very well balanced, right? So let's do it again. All right, now let's put 250 back in there. All right, 250 hertz. All right, let's zero that out. What about bass, that kick frequency? All right, now, I was talking about shelving filters before, okay? So these are your shelving filters, and they have a little graphic here to illustrate that. It's like you're increasing frequencies on a shelf, right? So what this means is with this particular curve, you're going to increase from 18K and above. Not just 18K, but everything, this way, everything beyond 18 kilohertz. Now we have 2 or 3 methods, yeah. So this one, again, this one's going to be a little bit more linear. This one is going to be a little bit more musical. You can see the curve is just a little more gradual, right? Think of it as the difference between, you know, non-Bezier and Bezier. Is that a bug? This should be a single click. Why am I having to double click these things? That's weird. Okay. And just to illustrate that, let's go to something like here. I'll go to like 12K here. You see how it's increasing everything to the right of that? Okay. That's what's known as a shelving filter. Go a little more harsh again. Yeah, look at that. What is, really? Why? Whoa. I'll log that one later. Okay, shelving filter. Let's talk about bass though. We're gonna turn on this band here. Let's go to 60. Actually, we saw 40, right? Let's do 45. I'm not using this one because this is a shelving filter too. Now for this, we're going to use a super narrow bandwidth. Let's use like a Q value of 12, just to show you here so you can see, and actually I'll turn this off so that's not in the way. All right, really narrow. So as you're looking at the frequency response graph here, you should really just see those kick drum frequencies getting accentuated. And of course you'll hear it as we're doing it here. It might even distort a little. So now let's take a listen. Are you hearing that? And yes, I did zero out the mid frequency. Yeah. It's a visualization of the boxy sound. What's up, Akin? Yes. So could you hear that? And do you hear how you're actually getting that? You're hearing the tone, right? As we're increasing that 45 hertz range on that kick drum, because it's there, it was captured. We're actually hearing it accentuate that as we amplify it, right? Now, there used to be a technique, this isn't done so much, but you hear this on 97.83% of all hip pop, is what I would call it, like just all modern sort of hip hop pop songs. They're all using the same nuanced new TR-808, 909, CR-78 samples these days. And one of the things that you could do on the original machines, those old drum machines, is you could use a tone generator in conjunction with the kick drum, and you would generate this 40 or 50 hertz tone, and you could elongate it. So you'll see, sometimes you'll hear that, like, I can't think of it who it is now. Actually, Katy Perry in, it was Roar. Right? That's how you could do that. Now, you would do that on the sample. They're actually elongating the sample. But if you had, you know, even a regular kick drum and you want to accentuate the tonality of it, assuming you've captured it, this is how you do it. And here I can probably just isolate the kick. So that's with, without, with, without. Okay. Akin is digging the beat. It's great when you can use the program to fix things. Oh, yes. Randy Cunningham. Ooh, like the 808. Yes. And again, you know, the 808s, they're tone-generated samples, so tones are creating them in the first place. You also used to do something that we used to call keying the oscillator, where you would take a kick drum like this, and then on your mixing consoles, you actually had a tone generator, tone oscillator. You would generate a 50 hertz tone and then use side chaining. So whenever the kick drum kicked, it would automatically open up this tone generator and create that. And then you could adjust the effectively the gate, how long it would stay open. So you could have or just, but now you have this super subby bass drum, and people love that. Okay, we've only got 1 more minute here, so we're going to go to just 2 more frequencies. All right, so let's go to my if I can even get to it. May only get to 1. We're going to go to vocals here, lead vocal. And I want to do some sibilance and see if I can show you some of that.
Move it to the other side, brace yourself, close your eyes. Haven't cleaned them for a while, more I twirl, the less I smile.
All right, so let's go to this here. All right, got 1 minute to show you all this. Okay, so we're going to flatten this out. We're going to go to approximately 5,600 hertz. Going to make this narrow, and I'm going to start increasing it, and you're going to start to hear how some of the just gets a little harsh.
But don't let the waxy gunk fool ya, 'cause some of that residue's cool. ASMR scratchy sound, move it to the other side, brace yourself, close your eyes. Haven't cleaned them for a while, more I twirl, the less I smile. But don't let the waxy gunk fool ya.
All right, that one's a little more difficult to hear because I wasn't sibilant in the first place, but you know, I don't want to lose the stream and I don't want to get cut off. So unfortunately, we're going to have to stop here for today. So much more that we could talk about. We've got Howard coming up, or somebody coming up with the XD challenge. So stick around for the rest of the day. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.